Good morning, everybody. We reached the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started today. I want to thank everybody joining us today for our webinar on building meaningful relationships. We're talking about special districts and your community. So today in our session, as I mentioned, we'll be discussing community relationships and building relationships among special districts as well as those in your community, medical providers as well. And why are we talking about that? Because increased connectivity and networking can help assist operations in the long run. That can help save money, time. It can also build trust with people in the event of an incident, and that's really what we want to focus on today is the safety and loss prevention aspect of things as well. So we will discuss today the importance of engaging with medical providers, as I mentioned, local law enforcement, emergency services, clients, as well as the public. We'll touch on a few different areas. We're joined today by the CSD Pool's own risk control consultant, Kyle Brown. Before his arrival at the CSD Pool, he spent 5 years as a corporate safety and compliance coordinator, creating and implementing programs to reduce injuries and hazards in the workplace. He's well-versed in conducting facility inspections, developing company safety trainings, and regulatory compliance. So we're excited that he's putting this on for us today. A couple of housekeeping items I want to discuss really quickly. We're recording today's session. If you have to step away or if you have technical difficulties, you'll get a copy of the recording through the same provider that you had the link sent to you from. PDF version of today's slides are available if you'd like to download them in the files box above the chat box. And speaking of the chat box, I see that everybody's found that and saying who they are and where they're from. So welcome everybody, all of our membership here. It's good to see everybody here today. If you have any questions throughout the meeting, throughout the webinar, go ahead and type them in there and we'll answer as they come up. And then at the very end, we'll pause for questions if you have any additional ones. Kyle is really excited, wants to answer a lot of questions at the end today. We left about 10 minutes to do so. So with that, I'll turn things over to Kyle. Thanks for being with us here today, Kyle.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and thank you for the introduction, Alex. As Alex mentioned, today we're going to discuss building meaningful relationships, what those meaningful relationships are going to look like for you as special districts, and who you really want to target when you're building those relationships. Alex gave me a brief introduction, and what I want to do, since he really covered my past work experience, I want to talk about some of the past relationships that I have built in my career and how they've helped me out, just as kind of a segue into building relationships. So this all started, my first job. One of the first things I was tasked with was going out and meeting the local fire department. They came to our site, we walked them through, showed them our confined spaces, showed them any other potential hazards we have. It was a concrete plant, so there were some engulfment hazards. And, you know, they were extremely grateful to have the opportunity to come out and see what we were doing. And it's those kinds of relationships that we're going to talk about building today. Thankfully, we never needed to use that relationship in an emergency capacity, but we had already kind of created it in case it were to happen. And then also at the same place, we had an occupational doctor. That's a doctor that focuses solely on occupational injuries, occupational prevention. Basically, if somebody gets hurt while they're on the job, we would take them there. And the benefits that I learned from developing that relationship with that occupational facility. And then Alex mentioned that I spent some time with Austin Powder Company while I was there, it being the explosives industry. And I'm going to touch back to this one quite a bit throughout the procedures because this is kind of where my passion for building those relationships came from, is I dealt with a lot of people. We dealt with the ATF. We dealt with local authorities, which is really important because you had a site that carried 100,000 pounds of things that most people shouldn't be using or working with. If you had a local law enforcement, a police officer, a fire department come to the site, they needed to know that they just weren't, and for whatever they were responding to, there was also that added layer of the hazard. So that was a big part of what I'd done. I also learned to work with field personnel. Being from that corporate side, I traveled across the country, dealt with managers with very different personalities. Some of them were excited to see you, some of them weren't. and being able to deal with them in a way that, one, was productive so that I got my job across, and two, just so they weren't smiling and nodding their head for a day and a half until I left, but what I was doing was actually leaving a lasting impact. Of course, worked with other authorities like DOT, MSHA. Here's another interesting one that's going to segue into to something we'll be talking about later is local homeowners. Worked with a lot of local homeowners because if there's a blast that goes off in a mine and quarry, everybody all of a sudden thinks that you cracked their foundation, and you've got to know how to go through and very politely tell them that that's not the case, and that what measures you have in place to prevent those things, which I think is a lesson that we can all take as special districts working directly with the public most of the time. And here at the CSD pool, I of course work with all of you. It is my most meaningful relationship that I've built, and one that I look forward to building throughout my career. We also work with the SBA, state fire chiefs, all the local vendors that we have that we partner to give you guys benefits, discounts on things. We have close relationships with them, and as well as other professional associations. So enough on the background side. Let's move right along. So who should we be focusing on developing our relationships with? Now, this is just a list. I'm going to hit on 6 big ones, but it's by no means what you should be limited to. If there's other entities, other folks that you think that you could benefit from developing relationships with, do not let this list hold you back. I just think that these are a great starting point, and I'm going to tell you why as we go along. So first and foremost, your local fire authority, your local ambulance services, your EMTs, your local police, sheriff, city departments, whatever that may be for you, and we'll discuss that a little bit too. Your medical providers. Who were you going to in the event of an emergency? Or not even emergency, just a regular injury. Your constituents, of course, the folks that you answer to. And one thing you're doing right now is developing that relationship with your friends here at the CSD pool. And at the end, I'm going to mention some of the connections you can have at the CSD pool that go a little bit further than just Josh and myself here at the Loss Control Department. So what are we going to talk about developing these relationships? For each one that we go through, I want to answer 3 questions. Your first question is, why should you be building each of these relationships? Why is it worthwhile to you as a district to take time out of your day and reach out and talk to these folks? Next is, how do you build the relationships? Talking to local authorities may seem daunting at first. Maybe you're really new to the area and you just got hired on at a manager position inside your district, and it seems pretty daunting to reach out to a community that you don't know. How do you reach out to them? How do you start to build that relationship? And then lastly, what are the benefits to building these relationships? What are the end goals that you're looking for? Because, again, we're not just building relationships to go have a beer with these folks on Friday night and watch the game, which it may turn into that, but that's not your end goal and that's not why you're doing it. So what are the benefits to doing so? All right, without further ado, we are going to dive on. First off is our local fire department. Why are we wanting to develop a relationship with them? Well, first off, so that they understand your operation and so that they can properly respond. Because at the end of the day, that's what your local fire department is there for. They're there to protect you in the event of a fire or other emergencies. And the more they know about you, the better they're going to be prepared to respond. And just with that in mind is, whenever you're reaching out for those relationships, have them walk through your facility. Show them the processes that they may encounter. Are you a library district where they're really just looking for the evacuation of the patrons of the library and making sure that they can access any part that may be, we'll say, on fire? Or are you a water and sanitation district where when they're responding to a fire, you have 10 buildings spread out across 15 acres and they have to know which building to go to, and are there hazardous chemicals stored that they need to be aware of. We'll get a little bit more into the hazardous chemicals in another slide, but one of the biggest things I want to leave you guys with, I'm going to say this throughout, but why does it matter that they know your operation? Why does it matter that they spend time with you and know your hazards? The end story of that is, one, we don't want to create two hazards by them going into a situation unprepared. And two, them knowing your site, knowing what building to go to, knowing the proper entrances and procedures save seconds. And in an emergency situation, seconds save lives. And that's one of the key phrases I want you guys to keep in mind when developing these relationships, is you're looking to gain those seconds. You're looking to gain those seconds that are going to make the difference of getting folks out of the burning building. They are going to salvage as much as your district as possible. I will tailor this to the other departments, but that is really what we're looking to do. And another thing is, they're experts in fire. They're going to be able to tell you things that even I wouldn't be able to tell you. I have a mile-high knowledge of fire safety, but again, these guys, they live, sleep, and breathe fire safety. So they are the resident experts. One thing I want to keep in mind, too, is this comes back from my time with the explosives company. Given the nature of what we've done, most of the sites were very remote. One thing that comes with a very remote site, and there's nothing wrong with this, is a small local volunteer fire department. Now, when you're talking things like confined space entry, which happened on a lot of those sites, we would have to reach out and say, hey, are you guys trained and have the equipment to do a confined space entry rescue? And sometimes the answer would be no, just due to the size and due to the location. So we would have to reach out to a further out fire department. And you might ask why I'm bringing that up is because I know we have a lot of special districts that are remote. Not all of us are in the Denver metro. And figuring out your fire department's capabilities to something like that is not something you want to figure out during an emergency. It's something you want to coordinate beforehand. Is it something to where you do a confined space entry every now and again, but your nearest fire department that responds is 40 minutes away, so maybe you want to notify them before you go in. And they're also going to be able to help you walk through the different hazards, the different things associated with it. I'm going to go back to confined space just because it's something I spent a lot of time on, and it looks like we've got a few water districts on site, so it'll make sense. They're going to help you develop your strategy. So I say this, the confined spaces that we entered back whenever I was at my previous job, they were tanks on the top of trucks. Yes, still technically a confined space, but what's interesting is somebody goes down inside that truck. You get them out. They're still 8 foot up in the air on the truck. Your fire department's going to help you troubleshoot ways to get out of that. So really rely on them for these things. They're also going to be able to help if, let's say, for the park and rec districts, you guys who have large conference buildings or large conference rooms in your rec centers. If there are large groups and let's say there's a fire and you need to evacuate 400 people, that's something to coordinate with the fire department beforehand, because the last thing you want is 400 people piling into their cars and blocking the road to your rec center that the authorities are trying to get to save. So they're going to help create muster points. They're going to help train your employees on how to control the crowds as you're leaving the emergency. And when you're controlling crowds, you're also making it more safe because you're controlling the panic. You're taking the decisions out of their hands. And one last thing is, what do you call for and what do you not call for? This is a big one that I see. I live up in the Bailey area, and anybody around the area would know that they've been doing controlled burns. Is that something you call for? They will put up signage. I follow my local fire department's Facebook page because they post information like that. You don't want to flood them with unnecessary calls. They already have a stressful enough job. So next, how do you reach out to them? This is the fun part. You can get creative with it. And it all depends on where you're at. Maybe you've never talked to your local fire authority. Maybe you've never Actually, maybe you don't even know who it is. Maybe you're best friends with the chief. It's just depending on where you're at. I will say first off, just reach out with a phone number. Now, let me emphasize this. I can't emphasize this enough. This goes for all of our emergency services. If you're trying to schedule a meet and greet or an introduction, do not use 911. If you Google the name of whoever you're trying to get in touch with, it'll give you an actual non-emergency phone number. And it's very vital that you do that. Next, if your district does open houses, if they maybe have like a community meet and greet, invite them to that. Because then not only will they know your district, they'll know your community, and it'll just help them know a little bit more about your district. Ask them if they can tour your station and discuss capabilities. This is one of those things that most fire districts I've been to are really happy to show you what they do because they're very good at it and they take a lot of pride in it. One example I like to give, and this is just to show you that not all capabilities are known unless you're asking questions, is I was at Summit Fire in Frisco, and I am doing a facility audit of one of their stations, and I see a trailer, and I just talk to the chief, and I say, what's that trailer for? And he says, oh, that's a trenching and excavation rescue trailer. I would have never known that. And that's great to know. So have those conversations. Ask them, are you prepared for confined space rescue? Do you have capabilities for trench rescue? Have them come tour your facility. Again, I said I'd done this back in the concrete plant. It gives you a peace of mind knowing that they know how to respond, and it's going to give them a peace of mind too. When they have an idea of what kind of situation they're going into, even if it was just something they spent an hour doing, they're going to come in knowing exactly where to go, knowing exactly what to avoid if you have hazards. Another way, once you've already established these communications, ask them if they offer trainings. Some fire departments, they'll teach you how to use fire extinguishers. They'll offer fire drill trainings, like evacuation trainings. And I know quite a few as well that do like first aid, CPR, AED trainings. So that's another benefit to creating this relationship. Next is notify when hazards at the workplace may be occurring. What does this mean? So some places, whenever, let's say you're doing a confined space entry, consider it a best practice to notify the local rescue authorities that you're going into the confined space. Talk to the fire department. Do they want you to notify them when you're entering a confined space that they may have to respond to? If so, how do they want you to notify them? Is it an email? Is it a text? Is it a phone call? Do they want to be on site during the whole thing? Have these discussions beforehand. Just don't say, we have somebody down in the hole, we don't know what to do. Be prepared, save lives, protect your employees. And last is ask questions. Ask questions how to prepare, what are the best practices. I've mentioned this before. These guys are the fire experts. If you have a question about a fire safety guideline, ask your local fire department. They are going to be much more happy to answer your question than to respond to a fire that occurred because you didn't ask a best practice. An example would be, could I store chemical X next to chemical Y? What kind of barriers do there need to be? They'll be able to help with things like that. So, what are the benefits? I've been kind of discussing the benefits as we go along, but I really just wanted to hit on some of the high points. One, your responses are going to be more tailored to you. They're going to know that they're responding to a confined space entry inside a manhole, and they need to bring their winch, and they need to bring their SCBAs. Or if it's a fire, they're going to know exactly, let's say it's a water and sanitation district, they're going to know exactly where your headworks building is, and they're going to be able to go directly there because you have showed them this before. Again, I cannot stress this enough. You gain those valuable seconds. They train and prepare for your site. If that's another thing, whenever you're reaching out and developing that relationship, offer your site as the training grounds for them. Because especially if they're doing a mock rescue at your site, they're going to be prepared, and you're going to be prepared too. You'll probably be more involved. They're going to know you and know exactly what you're explaining when you call it an emergency. And this is important too, because when you're calling it an emergency, let's say one of your buildings is on fire, you're going to be flustered. you're going to be panicking. You may not be as clear as you were, but they're going to be able to take the bits of information you're giving and mix it with the bits of information that they know from touring your facility and be able to give a more direct response to that. And they're not going to have to ask as many follow-up questions because they're already going to have that information. And again, you get those seconds. I briefly touched on the trainings. The trainings are a huge benefit because all those trainings are life-saving trainings. Fighting a fire is life-saving. Properly evacuating from a building and not causing a stampede down the stairwell is life-saving. And when they expand their operations, you may be considered. And what that means is Colorado is growing rapidly. So those small local volunteer departments might turn into a full-time staff department eventually, and they might be able to start getting things like that trenching and shoring response. And when they're expanding, if they know that that's a need that you have, they might put it higher up on their list. Whereas if you never talk to them, they simply just don't know. And lastly, they will give you fire safety advice. Any questions you have, again, ask the questions. If it seems like a dumb question, whenever it comes to safety, fire safety, protecting your district, protecting your employees and your constituents, no question is a bad question. They would be more than happy to give you that advice. All right, moving forward, we're going to discuss your local EMS or ambulance services. A lot of these are going to overlap, but they are points that should be touched upon just because they are important. So why do we reach out to them? So that they know your location, they know your activities, and you can build a plan for those emergency scenarios when your employees get hurt. Again, just establishing that relationship so they know who you are, where you are, the extent of your district, because let's say somebody's injured and you work for a library district that has 10 different buildings across 2 counties. I made that up off the top of my head. But if you just call and say, hey, I'm from XYZ library district, I need you to send out an ambulance, and they know that you have 10 buildings, they don't know that. And these are things that you're going to be able to discuss while you're establishing a plan with them. Maybe you come up with different names for each of them. Another thing, too, is you're going to be able to talk to them, discuss their capabilities and the limitations of their department, because maybe you have an injury that's very severe, and you can talk to them, explain to them what happens, and they're going to know, based on your facility, based on what they can do, that they're just going to directly have to move in and call, let's say, like a Lifeline. You can also work and establish a baseline of potential injuries and perform a risk assessments to see what injuries are common for your district and let them know those. Be like, we work with this, this, and this. Most injuries that come from us are more likely to be in this realm. And that's beneficial too, going back to when you're making a call to an emergency authority, it's typically a very panicked time and you might forget details. And if they already have that first level of knowledge going in, it's going to make a big difference. They also need to know things on going back to if you have multiple buildings, multiple locations. We'll say for the Park and Rec districts, do you have trails? Is somebody down that you're calling the emergency services for, are they 5 miles away from the nearest paved road? And is the emergency service going to have to bring a more capable vehicle or reach out to a district that does? Again, so they can be more prepared to protect them from things that are on site. This is kind of going back to the firefighters. If they're responding to, let's say, a fire that also had an injury, they need to know what areas to stay away from. And they will know your preferred medical providers. Like if it's a injury severe enough to call the EMS services, but not severe enough to where they can pick and choose where they take people, then they would know your preferred medical providers. And one of the last ones, which is really important because this has happened to me going out and visiting some of the districts throughout Colorado, is if you have a address that doesn't exactly line up with Apple Maps, it doesn't line up with Google Maps, maybe it's something best to where they know that they should use your coordinates, and that GPS is not going to take them there. And that goes back to saving you the valuable seconds. Them looking for your site because it doesn't exactly take you there is not a great way to get an emergency response. So how do you reach out to them? Again, just call their main line, not 911. Ask them for a tour of their facility. See what they do. Again, most people like to talk about offerings they have. See if they have any meet and greets. And most importantly, invite them to your facility. Discuss where they can go, what they have access to. Maybe you discuss a meeting point. If we ever have to call you into our facility, you stay here, and we're going to have somebody come out and meet you and guide you through the facility so you get exactly where you need to go. And back to ask them what is appropriate to call for. That could be a good conversation, because if somebody's injured, depending on the severity of it, just whenever our adrenaline kicks in and we're in the heat of the moment, it can often be hard to distinguish between, is this something that needs an EMS service, or is this something that we can drive them to the hospital for? So have those discussions with them. And oftentimes, too, they'll be able to provide trainings like that first aid training. So how does this help you with the district? Well, your response is going to be much quicker, and it's going to be more tailored to your site, because they're going to know what your site looks like and what you're doing. Going back to the trail access, maybe some remote, let's say a lift station, if you're a water district, do they need a vehicle with off-road access to get to you? Again, making sure that they're not going to create another hazard while entering the site. They know where the hazards exist. They can prepare for possible injury types. And we're really doing this to always gain those valuable seconds back. And another important thing about this, too, is they can train you. It doesn't have to be a very hands-on training. They can just talk to you and say, if I have an injured employee, what should I do while I wait for you guys? Of course, they'll tell you that on the dispatch line, but knowing those things before the injury takes place is going to help your muscle memory kick in. And that is all for the EMS side. Next, we're going to go into local law enforcement. I warn you, I'm going to get a little lengthy on this one because it does go into depth in a few different areas, but all are important. So, why reach out to your local law enforcement? One, to help prepare for emergencies, and two, they're going to give you expert response and advice. So whenever you reach out to them, why are you doing so? You want to prepare for emergencies. An emergency can be a very broad topic. It could be anything from an active shooter, which we're going to dive into a little bit more details, or maybe something as small as somebody's fighting in your parking lot. Not only are you going to be able to discuss your potential risk factors for each of these things occurring, you're going to be able to talk to them about ways to maybe diffuse the situation. What's the best steps for you, your employees, the rest of your constituents to stay safe until they arrive? Another thing, too, is to discuss what is appropriate for you to call them for. Is it appropriate to call them for vandalism? Is it appropriate to call them for a fender bender that occurred in your parking lot? There's hundreds of these things that may come up. Just make sure that you're asking questions. If you think that it might be something that your district could experience, reach out, ask, and start that conversation. One of the biggest things they're going to do is they are going to advise you in emergency response procedures. They're going to tell you what to do if those two folks are fighting in the parking lot. They're going to tell you the best practices to do during a bomb threat, during an active shooter, during a lockdown situation. They're going to tell you when you should go into a lockdown situation and what that may look like. Also is befriend them, because they are often more than just your emergency response. They're helping out your district in more ways than you can count. I know I've been to a few larger district events, and when you go to those, they'll have law enforcement just having a presence. They'll have law enforcement guiding traffic. They'll have them helping your big events possible, making those possible. Another thing, too, is I give a CDOT flagger training to most districts. And one thing we always talk about is the training I give you and as district employees, you do not have the authority to stop a red light. You don't have the authority to tell somebody to go through a stop sign. If you're in a flagging situation like that, you're going to have to reach out to local law authorities. And if you're on a big site, or let's say on an area where maybe people are a little bit more erratic, reach out to your local law enforcement, because that badge has a lot more authority behind it than you do with your stop sign. Again, you just like I mentioned for the fire department and the ambulance, you want to know the limits of their response. Part of the limitations, too, could be what is the average time we're looking at to get somebody out of our district. We will respond to ABC, but for this one, we like to call in another district as backup. These are things to know beforehand. And especially for some of the districts, just depending on where you're located, is to know who's going to respond whenever you call 911 in an emergency situation. Are you going to get the city police? Are you going to get a sheriff's office for county? Or are you going to get a state highway patrol? This may vary depending on what's happening and where you're located. I can't answer that for any of you, but whenever you reach out to your law enforcement, just ask them, would you be the one to respond? It's good to have relationships with all those if they all three apply, but typically you're going to have one that's going to be the first line of response. So it's good to know who your direct line is going to be to. Another big benefit to having this relationship with your local law enforcement is you're going to be able to discuss your community trends, anything that's happening that's concerning. Maybe they're seeing a lot more people walking up and down the streets vandalizing things. Maybe they're noticing a lot more fights breaking out, and they're going to be able to go and prepare and tell you about these things. And they'll just say, hey, listen, I know that your district has a site on Main Street, about a couple blocks away. We've been having a lot of fights break out, people walking around doing things that they shouldn't. We just wanted to make you aware. Maybe you should start closing the rec center an hour or two early, something like that. And another thing, which is as sad as it is, sometimes it does happen, maybe during one of your board meetings, you're going to be discussing a topic that gets heated. People get passionate about it. And it might be good just to call your law enforcement to have them in there as just that presence to keep everybody under control. Next, I've pulled out some entity-specific reasons that you could meet and talk with your local law enforcement, but I just want to clarify, too, this is by no means the only thing you should reach out to them for. It's just the first thing that popped into my mind. It might not even be the most relevant. It's just what I thought of whenever it came to my mind. So, for you fire districts, one thing you guys might get together and talk about is coordination. If you're both going to be responding to a call, is how do you work together and not hinder one another? Who's in charge of what? Who should be doing what? And just like whenever I was talking about the response to the scene of a fire, these are not decisions that you want to be making on the spot. It's something that should be discussed and rehearsed beforehand. Water and sanitation districts. What to do, let's say you have an aggravated constituent who's not happy about prices and won't leave your office and is causing a scene. Maybe you want to discuss that scenario with the local law enforcement, what that would look like. And here's another one. This one's a little bit more on the scary side, but it is always worth bringing up. I know a lot of water and sanitation districts, and some of them still use chlorine gas. Chlorine gas has just a mass effect if it were to leak, if there were to be a catastrophic explosion. If you have something like that in your district, talk to your local law enforcement and your fire department, because you may be wanting to plan for emergency evacuations for a half-mile radius. And that's not something that they want to know about whenever it happens. That's something that they want to plan, that they're doing mock drills for, that they're including you in. Because, again, that's going to keep the public safe, it's going to keep you safe, and it's going to make everybody's job easier. Cemetery district, call them for vandalism, people not wanting to leave, people staying past regular hours. Mosquito districts, angry citizens who don't quite understand what you're doing and may get very confrontational about you spraying something in their backyard. So that's something that Have that conversation with the authorities. Is it something worth calling them for? Is it something that you could just put them on the phone for? Have those discussions and develop those plans before they happen. Library districts, fighting unwanted personnel. They might even teach you how to de-escalate certain situations if that's not part of your training already, because it's definitely something that they've been trained in. And they'll give you tips, and maybe you're in a more high-risk area of something like that happen, and you just want somebody on site during certain hours of the day. And that might be something they could accommodate, it might not, but you'll never know if you don't ask the questions. Hospital districts. Maybe you have an unruly patient or family members. What do you do? And another thing to think about on the law enforcement side is if they have a detainee, somebody that they have captured and are about to take into custody but need medical treatment, if they bring one of those to your hospital healthcare district, what do you do? What are the procedures that you follow to make sure you're keeping yourself safe and you're not allowing that person to get away? Ambulance districts, what to do if you're called to an area that is unsafe. Maybe you're called to respond to, again, let's say a fight that got really severe and you have to go pick somebody up, but you're not sure if that area is safe for you to go through. Maybe you want a police escort. Metro districts, angry citizens, vandalism on your sites. And again, these are just the things that first popped into my mind. By no means is it all encompassing. So, next we have active shooter. They're going to help you prepare with procedures. They're going to show you the designated safe rooms that you could put your people to and how to protect those safe rooms, how to barge those doors to keep people safe. They're going to tell you what to do before and after they arrive. Like one thing I know from talking to police officers is whenever they arrive in an event like that, you don't want to go running to them frantically. They're not going to be able to tell if you're somebody looking to be saved or maybe somebody looking to attack them. They're going to give your employee trainings. They're going to tell you what to do. And they're going to tell you early warning signs to look for. And some might even help you do a live action scenario. I know I was with the Park and Rec District, and they done a live action training with some of their local authorities, and it went really well. So how do you reach out to your local law enforcement? Don't dial 911. Dial their regular phone number. Ask them, just walk in and see if you can see certain parts of their station, discuss what they do, what it might look like for you. Have them tour your facility. Again, have them see where the safe rooms could be. Have them see where your potential vulnerabilities are. Ask questions too, and don't just call them with problems. That's one of those things where if they're always responding to an emergency or always getting that person out who's fighting, they're going to dread coming to your district. But if you're asking them questions and trying to be proactive, that's going to go such a long way. And one of the last ones, this is actually something I didn't know was a thing until recently. I live in Jefferson County, and I see on their Facebook page that they have a meet and greet where you can go have coffee, with one of their officers and sit down and ask questions and have those conversations. Maybe you attend one of those. And I'm going to table that for something that maybe we should be doing with our constituents as well. And what are the benefits of this? If a relationship is built and they know who you are, what your site is like, you're going to have a better, more effective response. And what it's going to do is it's going to keep your district safe, and it's going to keep them safe. They're going to know how to approach that situation better if they spend time in your district, because we also want to keep our first responders safe as they're coming to help us. It's going to keep your staff more prepared, and they're going to be trained by professionals for the active shooter shooting, for anything else like that. They're going to know their capacity and what you should and shouldn't call for, like what's acceptable to actually call 911 for and what's just to call to their regular numbers and FYI. And all this is really going to work together to give you an enhanced response to your district. I want to leave you guys with 2. Practice for worst case scenarios, and that's what they're going to be here for those trainings. And if you can't guess yet, that's going to give you those valuable seconds that you would need in an emergency situation. All right, next we're moving on to medical providers. Why would you want to reach out to a medical provider? 1, you want more effective care. you want to reduce the impact of injuries. You want them to know you and what type of work you do so that they can treat you according. If they're expecting sprains and strains coming whenever you send somebody there, they're going to be able to more prepare for that. They're also going to know what kind of accommodations you can give your folks. So maybe you can put them on light duty instead of taking them off work for 3 weeks. They're going to be able to help with that more, which is going to get your employees back to work faster. And it's going to give them a more feeling of normalcy, because when everybody's hurt, self-esteem typically goes down, because it's going to help protect that. It's going to reduce the impact of injuries because they're going to be giving more standard care because they know your needs, they know what you can accommodate and what you can help facilitate. I also want to expand this to physical therapists. If you don't have a physical therapist that you partner with, I suggest finding one, because not only can they help get your employees back to 100% faster if there's an injury, but they also have that capability of, let's say, treating something before it's an issue. Whenever I worked at the concrete company, they had a physical therapist come on site twice a week for only 3 hours a day. But if you had any discomfort, anything that you thought might turn into an injury, or you just wanted to feel better, they would come. They would chat with you about what was wrong. You would get little massages, and honestly, it prevented a lot of injuries because you're staying there on that preventative side. And they can also help give you customized workouts. And so how do you develop these relationships, and what are you looking for? This is where I really want to spend some time here, is find providers that are in your area. And if you're in the Denver metro, it's going to be really easy. But if you're in a rural area, it's going to be harder to find those providers, and you might not have as many options. But either way, take a few, or the two that you have, and interview them. See what they can do. Are they going to help you meet your needs to get your employees back to 100% as quickly as possible? Are they going to make sure that they are not getting unnecessary scans, unnecessary evaluations, but only giving them the treatment that they need? Just shop around and interview them. Show them your facility and discuss potential injuries. And some of them may say, well, listen, we're in urgent care. The injuries that may happen here, you can take us for some of them, but you need to find another medical provider. I was in that situation. I said I had a great relationship with that occupational doctor that I worked with at the concrete plant. And I did. If I had a question, I could call them up, and they would say, bring them to us. You can probably treat them on site, or they need to go to an ER. Because I'll be honest, whenever I was doing that job, I was fresh out of college and very much had a learning curve ahead of me. And I also want to say, get creative. Don't just talk to your main medical providers. And they don't have to be designated providers, but talk to other folks and have relationships with, again, those physical therapists, somebody that you know that you can trust that's going to give your employees the best set of work. And sometimes you have to get creative and go to specialists. Just keep that in mind too. And once you've had a clinic or somebody that you set in, maybe it's a good idea to set a quarterly meeting. Talk to them about what they're seeing. Is there a trend? Because I can look at your guys' trends being pool members, but if it's a scratch that they treat, that's something that wouldn't come to me. But it's something that your doctor is going to be able to tell you about, like you had 18 cuts that were treated in the last month, and maybe you need to look at a protecting glove program, or bring it to me and we can discuss ways to provide that. But have quarterly meetings to make sure that your goals are being heard by them and that they're achieving those goals. And if they're not, it's always okay to shop around. All right. And what is the benefits of doing this? Well, one, you're going to get that more specialized care for your employees. They're going to know your expectations and work hard to do it. And the more likely they know your work and what happens, the less likely they are to give unnecessary care. And I say unnecessary care because if they know all the details, they're going to be able to pinpoint what happened and be able to treat it without as many other things typically. It's going to get your employees back to work quicker, which is going to help fulfill your fiduciary responsibilities to your constituents, because you want them back to work. That saves you money from training other employees. That saves you money from keeping them there. And it's going to help you notice trends. And you're going to be able to ask them for advice just like I did. And if, I have to bring this up too, if you have a great relationship, and let's say you have a bad actor working for you, they're going to be able to notice too that something isn't quite right in their claim. They're going to be able to give you that information. Next, I want to talk about special district success with medical providers. So we have a couple districts, and they know that they had some injuries just due to the nature of work. So they partnered with a local medical provider, asking them to get certified to give certain types of procedures, and they would give them a lot of business. And what did this do for them? It, one, cut the cost because it's a more direct procedure now. And instead of, let's say, for a rotator cuff surgery, instead of waiting 2 months to get in there, their employees are getting in there in a month and a half. And then these same districts, they're also partnering with physical therapists that they have on site, that they've hired themselves, that will actually come in. And they're getting their recovery time back from, let's say, 8 weeks to 6 or 4 weeks. And what is this doing? Yes, it's getting them back to work, which is amazing, because we always want them to be back at work so that they can actually do their job and we're not having to fill those roles. But what it's doing that I really like is that employee, by waiting 2 weeks instead of 2 months and half the recovery time, you just give them back months of their lives. Months of their lives they would have been sitting there on the couch watching TV. Now they can go out and play ball with their kids. They can go for a hike with their families. They can come to work and be with their coworkers. And you're really just giving them back that time. All right. Next is the public, aka your constituents, the people that we answer to. Why do you want to build a relationship with them? Well, because you're a public service and everything you're doing is to benefit the public. And you want to have conversations to make sure that you're doing what they intend for you to do. You answer questions because, again, you're doing the service for them. If they have a question about your district, always feel free to reach out, ask those questions. And I mentioned this before, Colorado's growing exponentially. If you're planning on a big improvement, a big expansion of your district, talk with your plans about the district before moving forward. Talk about what your ideas are. Maybe they have some things that they would like to add. Discuss projects that are going on. This can be a big one too. Discuss projects that are going on that may affect them, like maybe you're doing fire alarm tests. Maybe you are doing a large construction project. If you tell them about these things ahead of time and explain why it's happening, they're going to be much less aggravated whenever they have to sit through 10 minutes of traffic. And how do you reach out and make these relationships? So talk to people at board meetings. Don't just sit there, run through the agenda and run home. Ask them questions. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Do meet and greets, just like the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office does. Have a time where you're going to be at the local Starbucks that they can come and bring concerns, bring questions, or just learn from you. And one thing I want to say about this too is our whole goal, the what to why we're doing this, is to gain transparency. The more transparent you are, the more trustworthy you're going to be. You want to make sure that you're on the same page with your board, with all of your constituents, and that you're all working together for the same things. It's going to make it easier whenever you ask to vote, to expand, to build another fire station, to build another rec center. And this is also going to help to create a community, one that relies on each other, one that really trusts each other, and you can be the center of that being the special district. And one other thing I like to say is remember your public, but also remember the other emergency services that I mentioned, law enforcement, fire, police. Develop a relationship with them too, because this goes a long way. If a catastrophe were to happen, it goes a long way for the fire department to say, yeah, we've been working with this district for years. They did everything they could to prepare for it. It shows. That's much better than hearing, wow, I wish they would have called us. This could have been different. And it just goes to transparency and showing that you're, again, fulfilling that fiduciary responsibility to be responsible with the district in both funds and public safety and in what you're doing. And lastly, we are going to cover our friends here at the CSD pool. Reach out to us. We have a work comp department that can answer questions about rates, coverages, why does my rate look like this? Same thing with the P&L side. Ask them how things may affect their rates. If you're looking to build a new building but don't know if you want to or if it's financially feasible, reach out to them and they can give you some mile-high quotes. Or if you just have liability questions, reach out to the property and liability side, such as, should I be holding a parade through our metro district? Reach out to the claims department, both before and during a claim. They're going to tell you how to best handle a claim, how to prepare for a claim, what is the status of your claim that's happening, and what paperwork needs to be filed. They're there to help you through the beginning to the end of that process. Member services, I'm not really going to touch on member services because I believe Alex has a little plug right after this. And lastly is risk management. It's me, the person who's been talking. We're a no-consequence service. Not only do we help you with safety and risk, but we're here to help you build your relationships too, because a lot of these folks that we talk about, the fire districts, the ambulance districts, the hospital districts, we work with those. And if we don't, we know somebody who does, and we can help you develop those relationships. We also have plenty of relationships with the vendors that help with things like HR, cyber, training. And one of the biggest things I say, if I've come out to your site and talked to you, I always say that this is where we shine, is you just don't have Josh and I's collective knowledge of safety and risk, but you have the whole pulse. I'm going to tell you stuff that's going well for a district in Denver if you're in Grand Junction and vice versa. I like to think of it as just a collective community sharing best practices so that we can make sure that everybody goes home and we keep our district safe. So I'm going to leave you with this lasting thought, and it's all this boils down to why are we developing these relationships, and it's help us help you. Help the fire district properly respond to any emergency at your location. Help your ambulance emergency services know how to properly respond and get to your employees who may be injured. Help your local law enforcement to respond to any emergencies or anything else that you may be encountering. Help your medical providers know what kind of care you expect them to give and how to best properly treat your employees so that they can get back to their normal lives sooner rather than later. And then help us to pull. Tell us what you want and tell us what you're curious about, and we'll help you. Josh and I help us help you make your district safe and develop these relationships. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to questions. Thank you guys for sitting. We ramble for a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Kyle, thank you. We'll open up for questions right now. So if anybody has any questions about how to engage with, departments, organizations in their community, questions about the services we provide that, we can come out and engage with you, go ahead and type those into the chat box now. I think Kyle might have a few questions. We'll just move a little bit quicker since we're getting close to time. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on the member services piece of the puzzle too. We're here as a resource for our membership. We have a lot of no-cost programs and services available to help out our membership with their safety and loss prevention goals. As Kyle mentioned, him and Josh are available for on-site safety inspections, consultations. We can schedule a visit, come out and talk to you about what's going on at your organization. And then we also have a lot of software services as well that we offer membership at no cost. We have a lot of training solutions, cyber resources, HR resources. So if you're interested in any of that and engaging with us, you can visit our website at csdpool.org where we have that all listed out. And if you have any questions about anything that you see there or anything today, just be sure to email us at info@csdpool.org, and we'd be happy to have an additional conversation with you. Kyle, do you have any maybe questions that came up in your own head as we were talking through today's presentation that might be relevant to leave our membership with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came up with some just in preparation. So I'm going to ask the question, then I'm going to answer it. So rural communities, how do you get in touch with your local authorities if you're not sure who they are? My initial response would be reach out to somebody that you know locally in the community. Do a quick Google search, because most of these places will show their limits, or it'll at least give you an idea of where to start looking. Talk to your local commissioner or anybody at like the county department. They're going to be able to tell you the zoning for those things. All right, the other question is, what if I only have one medical provider in my area? Again, another one of those rural area questions. My suggestion there would be still develop that relationship, still set that expectation, especially if it's a practice that has maybe more than one doctor. Talk to both of them. Maybe there's one that's going to provide you with better answers, better care than the other one. So just do with what you can. And I know that there's also a couple online medical options for the rural communities, but that's not going to help you if somebody needs to take an ambulance somewhere. So yeah, just still develop that relationship and help set that goal, because if you're coming to them at a place of asking for a question and wanting to be helpful, that's going to go a lot farther than just showing up. What should you look for in a medical provider? Well, one, you want to make sure that they have all the facilities, x-rays, MRIs, anything that may be considered useful to getting your employees, figuring out what's wrong with them and getting them back up on their feet. Or if they don't, make sure they have a relationship with somebody that does, so you don't spend a lot of time going back and forth. And also make sure that they share your goals, that you want to get them back to 100% as quickly as possible. Make sure that they're going to answer the phone when you pick up. Make sure that they're going to give your employees things to do to help them in the meantime, maybe little exercise regimens, but just somebody who's going to go above and beyond for you. All right, so what if you reach out to a service and they will not meet with you? Let's say they don't have time. Because let's just say, I know a lot of people say our park and rec districts, the summertime is their busiest time of year, so maybe they don't have time to meet with other folks. Schedule something for when they do have time, and I always talk about going and touring, having a lunch. Those are best practices just because you have more time with them and it can be more in depth, but it doesn't have to be. You could have a 10-minute phone call. You could send them a Google Map image of your site and just be like, just an FYI, I've labeled each of these buildings in case you were ever to happen to come. This is where we'll be meeting. Does this look good to you? It doesn't always have to be that in depth. All right, and I talked about meeting up with the public, making that presence, allowing them to answer questions. And the question was, what if one person dominates public meetings and doesn't let anybody else talk, which I know can happen quite a bit. And my suggestion there would be have an agenda, but try to steer them on course as much as possible, and maybe have a conversation with them outside and just get it taken care of so they're not derailing everything else. Those are the quick questions I came up with. Does anybody else have any other questions? All right. Well, guys, I really appreciate you sitting through this. I hope you all got something from it. And if you have any other questions, follow-up, or would like to have us out to your site to discuss this further, my email contact information is on this last slide. Please feel free to reach out.
All right, fantastic. Kyle, thank you very much for putting this on today. Very informative, and just want to thank our membership for being here today for today's webinar. If you'd like to sign up for next month's webinar, we're going to be doing an HR webinar on energizing people for performance. So that should be a really good one, and good for taking it back to your staff and everything. All right, we'll get you out of here a couple minutes early. Just want to, again, thank you, Kyle, and thanks to everybody at our special districts in Colorado for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.